Welcome back to the Cart Barn. This week, Greg and I have a exciting guest lined up for you. His name is Gary Christian. Gary was born and raised in the UK. He currently lives in Birmingham and has been there for quite a while. Gary came over and played golf at Wallace State in Hansville. Went on to play at Auburn University. After his time there as an all SEC player, he amassed 30 mini tour victories and 2 Korn Ferry Tour victories before becoming the oldest rookie in PGA Tour history at the age of 40.
So yeah, Gary's an interesting guy. He's involved in various parts of the game still, and he kind of dives back into my time as a sports editor at the Times Daily. He actually won a mini tour event, teardrop tour event, out over here at the Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail at the Shoals. Uh, Gary is a motivational speaker. He's a golf coach. He teaches a little bit, and he's an author of a book. It's called "Beat the Course, Not Yourself." And interesting interview with Gary. He goes into the mental side of the game, and that's kind of where he figured his strength really was as a player. He admits he wasn't the most gifted ball striker, the longest hitter, the best putter, but he felt like he had an advantage when he was playing, just from the mental strength he brought to the game. So, going to be an interesting conversation today with Gary Christian from the UK, now a Birmingham resident, who also does some Golf Channel, PGA Tour live, and ESPN commentating on the side. So let's just dive into Gary Christian on today's episode.
Well, welcome to the Cart Barn. Today we're joined by former PGA pro and Birmingham resident Gary Christian. Gary, welcome to the Cart Barn.
Thank you so much. It's great to catch up with you guys.
Nice to have you on. Yeah, so interesting way you ended up in Birmingham. Why don't you just kind of take us back to growing up in England and how you got into the game and the differences growing up playing golf over there as maybe to what you see over here.
Yeah, well, it was, like I guess a lot of PGA Tour players, it all started probably with their dad with just a set of cut down clubs that he actually found in a jumble sale, rummage sale. And I've got all these cool bits of memorabilia from when I was playing professionally on the tour. My most proud bit of memorabilia is my original golf clubs in a little shadow box. So they're about, I don't know, 2 feet long, maybe, 2 hickory shafts, 2 metal shafts. But my dad just took a hacksaw and there you go, cut to length. So I was like Bryson DeChambeau early on. All my clubs were the same length. But no, I was a pretty decent player growing up early, and then I got into all the team sports, and I played soccer and cricket and rugby, and someone of my size, rugby is not a very smart choice. So about when everyone grew and I didn't, I thought golf was probably a lot safer vehicle for me to get into sport. So I think I started playing serious about 14 or 15, and I finished high school, and unlike basically every single PGA Tour player over the last 30 years, I actually held down a job for a couple of years. And it was a pensions administrator's job in London, which is far more boring than it sounds, which is hard to believe, isn't it? And I was playing twice a week at the weekends, and I was playing in amateur events. And, I always felt like I was at a disadvantage, obviously not playing as much as everyone else. But there was something about me that I felt like I could beat these guys, but I just had that built-in excuse. So I kind of took a leap of faith, and there was an American company that put together, in effect, a golf tryout in Orlando. And I went on that. We saved all our money up and got picked to play at Wallace State in Hansville. Was not on any scholarship, but fortunately was quite clever, so earned an academic scholarship fairly quickly. And now I had that opportunity to play 7 days a week, and that was all I needed. Just so it put it in my hands. I was in control of having no excuses. And with regards to difference in the style of golf, I found it was far easier over here because it was obviously more manicured. It was softer. It seemed like when you hit it in the trees, you always had a shot to the green. We played a lot of golf at Terry Pines, Chris, as you would know. And, every time you missed a fairway, you're in the trees, and there was lovely gaps. And you did that in England, you'd be standing in a blackberry bush or a gorse bush, or you wouldn't be able to hit the ball, let alone do anything going towards the green. So I remember my teammates started complaining one day because the pine straw that they spread underneath the trees was too thick, so they weren't getting the best lies and the best footing. So I said, "You boys don't know how lucky you are."
Yeah. Well, we are both Wallace State alums. So to that end, which course do you like better, Terry Pines or the Muni?
Well, I enjoy Terry Pines immensely. I set the course record out there, I think, in my first year, and then they changed it. So I guess I'm always the old course record holder. Corman Muni was a little bit of a shock to the system because I'd grown up watching US golf with these lovely green striped fairways and these quick pure greens, and it was common Bermuda on the greens when I played, and I was a decent putter. And when the ball went the opposite way to the slope because of the grain, I was a little bit befuddled by it all, but I know they've really changed it around when they redid it. It's actually a really nice course now. So it was a lot of fun. As I said, to come from London to a dry county in North Alabama was a little bit of a shock to the system. But I remember when Coach York, picked me up from the airport. We were just driving, we're halfway there, and he says, "Now, son, I want to tell you, we're in a dry county." And he said, "I know you boys like to party." And I was trying to kind of figure out, what does this mean? Party and no rain. I said, what, have you had a drought or something for the last few weeks? I didn't understand what it meant. He explained, and I said, "Oh, you didn't tell me about that when you signed me, did you?" So we found out Decatur and Warrior were quite close, though, so we were fine.
My wife's from Coleman. I worked 6 months in Coleman in 1982, and you learn the road to Warrior very quickly.
Exactly. Well, Corman Muni and Decatur and Terry Pines were the closest points to the two county lines, so we had our choice.
Now, did Terry Pines have one of those vending machines that if you hit the bottom button for extra 50 cents, you might get a beverage?
If we were allowed in the clubhouse, we probably would have had a go at that button, but I think they kept the riffraff like us out.
Well, where did you go after Wallace?
So I was really fortunate. I won a number of times at Wallace, and I was All American, first team All America at my sophomore year. And Auburn gave me a scholarship, so it's basically UAB and Auburn recruited me, and UAB were going to give me a full scholarship, which would have been a pretty good deal for my family resources and finances. But there was just something about Auburn that just stuck out, and I really enjoyed the quality of courses. I enjoyed the coach. And obviously enjoyed everything about the campus. So it was a tough decision, but my son goes to UAB now, so at least we've kind of we've evened things out a little bit.
Auburn, not a dry county.
Yes, that was another one of the selling points.
Did you play for Mike Griffin?
I did, yes. So I know he had been there many, many years, and set the footprint, set the foundations for the program as it is now. And obviously, Coach Kleinert has done some just incredible work. To become the Coach of the Year, win the national championship is just, it's phenomenal to see how that program has advanced and kept evolving and kept improving. The facilities are amazing, and I see that it's sort of made Alabama maybe up their game a little bit from the look at their new practice facilities.
It's amazing when you mention facilities, you learning, practicing at Terry Pines opposed to what Auburn and Alabama and Vanderbilt are all Mississippi State are working at now. Would that have expedited your pro career had you been able to have access to those facilities? Or
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just you can't even compare college golf from now to even 15 years ago, let alone 30 years ago when I was there. It just, it bears no resemblance. Basically, college golf right now is basically what the Korn Ferry Tour was 30 years ago, or 25 years, even 20 years ago. So the quality of play, the quality of player, the full development of the player from, obviously mechanics to psychology to nutrition to every single thing you could possibly need they basically have a pro team around them, just the same as the best players in the world have a team around them.
Did it
Yeah.
take you a long time to transition from life in England to life in rural Alabama?
Not really. I think when you're kind of forced to leave your country, you and your friends and your family and everything that is comfortable, that you're basically forced to grow up very, very quickly indeed. And I didn't have a car, I didn't have hardly any money, and so you learn, number one, you learn to make friends with people as quickly as you can. And it, I made some lifelong friends there and at Auburn, obviously, and it just it was that period of my life that turned me from a boy to a man almost overnight. And I would not be the person I am today without having to have, as I said, taken a leap of faith and just sort of thrown yourself in with not much of a life belt around you.
So when did you kind of set your sights on turning professional and thinking, I might could make a living at this?
Well, it was really odd. I was all SEC at Auburn in my junior year, and so things were looking pretty good. I think there were some people looking at me as someone who they might want to sponsor. Obviously, I had no money to support myself, so I needed sponsorship. And then I made the cardinal error of changing equipment. My best friend Ian Steele, was on with me at Wallace, and I beat him basically every time we played. And then he switched equipment one year in the summer, I think it was, and all of a sudden became this incredible player. And so, logically thinking, I thought, well, it can't be Ian; it has to be the equipment. And so I made the same switch and was absolutely awful as a result. So I was always a blade player. I always liked to shape my shots, and I went to, I think it was some Titleist DCIs, and there were no shape in those lumps of metal. And so my nice little fade became a big push cut, and you can't play golf with a push cut or a low pull. So I went from number one on the team to number 5 on the team my senior year, and that was basically the dream over. I was basically going to go home because there was no business me turning pro. But for some generosity, and belief from other people, I was able to stay a little bit longer. And I met a family tailgating at Auburn, and they let me live with them for a few years. My mum and dad came to graduation. None of my family had ever gone to university before. And we were at their beach house. And one morning, I remember waking up and thinking, man, what am I going to do now? I guess I got to go home. And that morning, we were sitting around the breakfast table, and they said, hey, we really believe in Gary, and we would love for him to come live with us for a few years and see if he can get his game back. So it was that second opportunity. And then I started playing a bit of Inverness through their next door neighbor. And the general manager, Denton Scott, took a liking to me, like my work ethic, like the way I went about the game and how I treated people, and helped me become the membership director there, which allowed me to play 7 days a week or 6 days a week and play with members, play with prospective members. And then as a result, like year to year, I started going from shooting, low 70s to, in the 60s most time. And when I went to another course, I would shoot par or better. And then that second year, it was, 67s and under par at other courses. That still wasn't good enough to turn pro in my eyes. And then that third year, it was mid 60s basically every time I played at Inverness, and in the 60s every time I traveled. So that was when I knew, I believed I belonged to turn pro. I spent a lot of time with Dave Reagan, the great former PGA Tour player, Ryder Cupper from Pine Tree. And he just sort of mentored me as well. So we just spent hours just talking and listening to what he would talk about and how he went about things, and just kept it so simple. And so when you're talking to someone who's achieved what you would like to achieve, it was just an incredible opportunity to benefit from that. And just a group of people got together from Vestavia, and then a few friends of mine, and went out on the mini tours and won 4 times my first year, and got through qualifying school, got on what is now the Korn Ferry Tour. And I thought, well, this is it. We're back. We're going to dominate. And found out pretty quickly I wasn't good enough to play on the Korn Ferry Tour. So was back to the mini tours for 6 years, and was just futility of winning several times a year. The good news was I never lost money for my sponsors any year on the mini tours, which is very hard to do. I always had the ability to win, but it was just when it counted at qualifying school, I would always get through first stage, and round 3 or 4 at second stage would be where I'd have that one mid 70s round, and I'd miss out by 1 or 2 shots, and it was back to the mini tours. So it was a very long, arduous. He had to have resilience and perseverance and all those characteristics that you want to have as a human being. And obviously, I had to pivot in how I went about things, and that's when I threw myself into the mental side of the game.
So Gary, what year was it that you qualified first for the Korn Ferry?
That was in qualifying school in 1998. So I played all of 99, and I made probably a third of the cut, something like that. But I always hit the ball pretty straight, and I always hit a lot of greens, but I wasn't good enough chipping and putting, and that was the difference. I missed a lot of shots by a shot, but a lot of cuts by a shot or two. And turned what would have been a semi decent rookie year into just kind of what you would expect when you weren't quite used to that level of competition. But the mini tours were great for me. They were, again, some of the happiest times I ever had playing professional golf, because it was just, you were learning your craft, and everyone was in the same boat. Everyone was trying to win because that was the only way you could make money. And so it toughened me. It really made me a really good player, and knew how to win, which was always going to translate, but I just had to get to that next level. And as I said, that's why I knew I had to find a different path, because physically I was just I was a good player, but nothing special. But I had to excel in another part of the game that maybe others didn't appreciate and didn't pay any attention to.
How much added pressure is there playing out there when you're playing with sponsors, money? Was that always in the back of your mind that, man, I've got to play well, or these guys are going to say, see ya?
Well, it was really odd, because so the original group, they kind of stopped after a year or two. I actually, it was after the first year they were really happy. The second year on the Korn Ferry Tour, they weren't so happy, and so they dropped out. But a couple of the guys who had stuck with me, who were my friends in that group, they put more money in, and I've got a few other friends who were investors. I don't even think we had a contract. I think it was just a handshake agreement, and there really wasn't any pressure they put on me. I heard some horror stories of some of my other pros who, the sponsors were checking in after every round and complaining when they were missing cuts and they weren't bringing in any money. And I never ever had that. I don't even know if the sponsors knew what I was doing. I would send out, in effect, an early blog. I would just get a bulk email list on America Online and send it off to them every day, and just say, I shot 69 and I made $1,200, and most of them wouldn't even reply. And at the end of the year, we'd tot it all up, and whatever I made over what they gave me would go 50-50. So I was never going to get rich, but they were hopefully never going to lose money, which they didn't. And at the end of the agreement, when I got to the tour and I could pay for myself, I think they tripled their money. So it was a pretty good little investment for them.
I can't imagine thinking, hey, I'm sponsoring this guy on the mini tour and I'm going to make a ton of money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the nice thing about doing it with friends who are not on your case all the time, wanting to know where every dollar and penny goes. So it was an amazing group of people that had my best interests at heart, and they were just doing it. I guess it's better than going to a casino. At least they could trust that it wasn't all going to go in one spin of the roulette wheel.
So you played out there, then and back to the mini tours. Then you had another run back to the Korn Ferry.
Yeah. So what happened at the end of 2004? 2004. I missed out at second stage again, I think by a shot. It was at the Ombre. It was a great golf course, really difficult. It was right up my alley because it was very, very tight. It was a double bogey in every swing. And I could just feel as the tournament went on, it just got tighter and tighter, and my swing got tighter and tighter. And as I said, I missed out by a shot, and that's a long drive back from Panama City back to Birmingham. And so I had 5 hours to think about my life, my career. I was married. I had a 2-year-old child or a 1-year-old child, and I knew that I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. As I said, I was making, putting $10,000 in the bank at the end of the year, but obviously, with responsibilities, that wasn't nearly enough. So, I was just trying to figure out what is it I can do differently. And so I got home. My wife commiserated with me, and gave my son a hug, and I went upstairs to my little room, and it was it was quite funny because it was dirty. It was stuff everywhere. And I go back to my relationship with Dave Reagan. He had given me some golf psychology stuff about, I don't know, almost 10 years before that I kind of flicked through, but didn't really pay any attention, maybe wasn't mature enough to understand the validity of it. And, I like all people do when they clean up their room, they just open a closet door and chuck it all in there, and now the room's clean. And when I opened that door, that box with his stuff in there was just sort of sitting there. So it was as if it was begging me to look at it. And I looked at it and I took it out and I just sat on the couch, and all of a sudden, I just started flicking through it and started saying, well, that's me. I do that. And then flick to the next page. I do that. I do that. I do that. And what was great at the end of it, there was kind of a plan. Okay, if you do this, this is what we need to do instead. And so that was it. I rushed downstairs and said to my wife, hey, I found what it is I need to do. I found the pivot. I found what the path is now to success. And so I just, right there and then, I made that commitment to practice less on the golf course and on the practice range, and take that time that I'd saved and spend it, in effect, just shutting myself off and becoming as mentally tough as I could. So there was a lot of visualization exercises. There was a lot of deep muscle relaxation exercises. There was tension release exercises. I did something called autogenics. I ran into a guy, another, 6 years before, who was an eminent clinical psychologist. He gave me some autogenics tapes and some subliminal tape. So I couldn't get enough of it. I read every psychology book I could, and I came out that next year a completely different player. My swing hadn't changed, but I was just mentally ready for any situation that could possibly be thrown at me. And that year, I think I played 25 events around the mini tours, and including qualifying score, and I never finished outside the top six. And there were some weeks where I was playing awful, but because I was mentally tougher than everyone else, I could turn what was last year a 74 into a 71 or a 70, and then come back the next day and shoot 67 and have a chance to win the tournament. So that was the change. And I was pleased at was no one else was doing it. So every time I stepped on the tee, I felt like I had a competitive advantage. There were other players who hit it 30 yards further than me. They had a competitive advantage being closer to the green and having short irons into most holes. But I had a competitive advantage that far outweighed that, in my opinion.
I always thought that Tiger's mental toughness set him apart, turning 74s into 69s or 70s, just kind of willing himself into shooting a good score.
Oh, exactly. Well, you think of some of those years kind of towards the back end of his successful part of his career, he was hitting it all over the place. And, half the field on the PGA Tour would have missed the cut, let alone had a chance to finish in the top five like he was doing every time. So it was just, that was the power that he had to be able to move on from that disastrous shot and just, give the next shot the very best try he possibly could, and do everything he could to hit a great shot. And what you would find is he would very rarely back up an awful shot with a bad shot or a dumb shot. And he would oftentimes follow up a disastrous shot with an incredible shot. So not only was it the mental toughness, but it was the imagination, the ability to be able to conjure something up. Much like Seve, Seve and Tiger late on had a very, very similar type of way of playing the game, where it was all over the place, but there was never a spot they were out of play where they couldn't get it on the green and have a chance to make a birdie, whereas so many others would have struggled to make par.
So amazing insight there. So when you transitioning away from the professional competitive side, why don't you catch us up now? I know you work for the Golf Channel some. What else is going on in your life?
Yeah, well, so I mean, as a result of the mental toughness, I got onto the Korn Ferry Tour, and I played 6 years on the Korn Ferry Tour. I won a couple of times, and the second year I won in 2011. I graduated to the PGA Tour as a 40-year-old rookie. I made the FedEx Cup playoffs as a rookie at 40, which it's hard enough being a rookie on the tour to start with, let alone being 40. And played with Tiger at the Barclays, I think third or fourth from the last group on a Saturday at Bethpage Black. which was quite the experience. And it was great for me to have that insight of what it's like to play with the best player that's ever played. Obviously, he and Jack are basically head and shoulders above everyone else. But to be inside the ropes and experience that was unlike anything I could even imagine it would be like. Unfortunately, that next year I had a career-ending injury. My knee blew out at the Canadian Open, and I had 3 operations trying to fix it, and it never got fixed. So I always wanted to be in the broadcasting field, but I was hoping in my 50s, not in my 40s, and so I was kind of forced to do that. And again, there was kind of like a guardian angel on my shoulder. Just timing was good in that I called the executive producer of Sky Sports in Britain, and they said, "Hey, you're just the guy we've been looking for. We need a guy who's English, who's played on the PGA Tour. All of our talent played on the European Tour, and we need someone with your insight and your ability to take us through what it's like to be on the PGA Tour." So I worked there for 2 years, 17 weeks of the year. So I got to spend time with my mum and dad and my brother and my friends, and an opportunity that I never thought I would have living in America. So that helped me start my career off. And that exposure led to the Golf Channel and PGA Tour Live, ESPN. And it's been great to have covered basically every type of event, from majors to Ryder Cups to the PGA Tour to the LPGA to college, and the Korn Ferry Tour. So I've been very, very fortunate to have been in that, and I really enjoy it. But it's getting harder and harder to be a broadcaster. There's more and more people want to do it. And so there's less and less weeks to work. So again, I've had to pivot. So I've had a lot of pivots over the years, going from England to America, from college to pros, from pros to broadcasting, and now kind of, I would like to call it, we would call maybe a portfolio career of some broadcasting, coaching, corporate afternoons, hosting travel trips around the world, and now being an author. And so what I've used is that experience from what made me the player that I was, and try and bring that to a sort of an introductory level for people who are curious about it, that get a little bit intimidated by a little bit more of an academic golf psychology book. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how it works and how it sells. And beat the course, not yourself, is the name of the book. And we've had some really good reviews so far. So I'm hoping that that's going to keep working along.
So, I mean, let's back up a little bit to you and Tiger, Bethpage Black. What kind of mindset did you take to the first tee that day, and how intimidating was it? Maybe not just playing with Tiger, but everybody out there to see Tiger, probably not to see Gary Christian.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'd like to think there was 3 or 4 people there, but you never know. So it was, like I said, what I did so well to make me successful was to visualize what was going to happen. I couldn't visualize what was going to happen. I had no frame of reference. I played with Jason Day before. I played with some big names, but there's only one big name in 2012, and that was Tiger. And so I really didn't know what to expect. I got to the course and I felt okay. I got on the range and I felt okay, but things felt a little bit like they were moving a little bit fast. I got on the putting green and the greens were ridiculously quick, and putting was always that piece of my game that I was always, if there was going to be a weak point to my game, that was it. And I was on that putting green. I thought, oh dear, things don't feel quite as comfy as they did the first 2 rounds, because I'd obviously putted magnificently to be in the position I was in. But I did my relaxation exercises. I felt okay. I think I'm going to be okay here. I got to the first tee, and you just see that mass of humanity down there. That I'm used to 12 or 13 people watching me, and I think they estimated somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 people were wrapped from the tee all the way down the fairways, all the way around the green, and then around the back, getting ready to go to the next hole. So it was such a weird look. It actually made it easier, because all I had to do was fit it between the crowd, and I was going to be just fine. So it actually helped my visualization, and I striped it off the first tee. And we shook hands on the first tee, Tiger and I said to McCarthy, yeah, it was nice. It was nice for him to come over, and I figured that was going to be it. And so my caddy and I walked off the tee, and here comes Tiger running after me. And I thought, blimey, what have we got going on here? And he said something, and I gave the perfect answer, because later in the round, and from what I'd read about him, and from what Jason Day had actually told me in the shuttle ride back to the clubhouse after the second round, he said he loves being treated like one of the boys. And so he ran down after me, and he asked me, "Hey, Gary, what part of Australia are you from?" And I'm from England. And so the great answer that I gave was, "Tiger, your people didn't do a very good job researching me last night, did they?" And he laughed. And that kind of just broke the ice. And I got to walk and talk and swap stories and spend, at least half of the time walking down the fairways and just chatting with Tiger Woods, just, playing around a golf in a competitive situation, trying to beat each other's brains out. But it was an incredible experience to experience what people could only dream of, and so few people had done before, which is be inside the ropes with arguably the best player that's ever played the game. And what struck me was he's actually a really normal person when he's inside the ropes, when he's in the comfort zone of being just you and him. And I'm a big James Bond fan, and I think in Doctor No there was a chapter talking about being trapped in a mink-lined cell, and that's what it feels like Tiger Woods is. He's trapped in the mink-lined cell of superstardom, where he can't be who he wants to be. He's just always on his guard, and it was amazing watching him flip the switch when we got outside the ropes, walking maybe after we finished, or walking from one tee to another, or one green to the next tee. And it's like the blinkers came on, and he just would look down at the ground and wouldn't make eye contact. Some of the things the crowd was saying, this was a revved up New York crowd from Long Island who had been drinking all day, and so there wasn't much of a filter there. And I'm listening to the stuff they were saying to him, and we were walking down one of the fairways, and I said, "Man, you must hear what they say to you." And he said, "Yeah." He said, I cannot engage. I cannot make eye contact. I cannot do anything, because I know that will be the story then at the end of the day." And so he just has to kind of put up with it. But what he does, he's quite clever. So when he's finished the 18th, he just gets his scorecard out and pretends he's writing something in the scorecard, and has his head down so he doesn't have to talk to anyone or see anyone. And then when he gets to the scorer's tent, he's back to normal again. So it was an amazing experience. I did say to him, actually, on one of the holes, we were talking, and it was on the back nine. I said, "Tiger, it's been just an incredible experience for me to see what you go through, and how you are, and what a normal bloke you are." And I said, "But you know what? I wouldn't swap my life for yours or anything in the world." And when someone looks at you without saying anything, and he just looked at me, and I could just tell he just looked at someone as anonymous as I am, and just said, "God," I just said to himself, "I'd love to be in your shoes just one time." And it really brought into perspective. If you're chasing superstardom, there's an awful lot that you lose. You lose a lot of your humanity, and you lose a lot of what it is that you want to do, even though you've got all the resources to do whatever you want to do.
Wow, that's a great story.
Mm.
So how many times did you hit it past Tiger off the tee?
Let's see. I would say none, but I was straighter, so that was good. But we both had just a horrific time on
That's
the
good.
putting green. I think he three putted 6 times. I think it was the most he'd ever three putted in his professional career. And I said to him, I said, "Yeah, I know Augusta's quick, but these have got to be right up there, don't they?" He says, "Man, dude, these greens are quick." He added one extra word that I won't say just to qualify it. He said the only difference is these are basically flat compared with Augusta. But he said, "Man, these are amazing." They were running about 14 and a half, and then they dried out, and we had a bit of wind. So they were probably running somewhere in that 16 range. It was just, I didn't know what to do. I really didn't.
Putting in your bathtub.
Exactly. Yeah. I was on I hit 2 really good shots on the first hole, and, I was just standing over there. I think I had like a 15, 20-foot birdie putt, and I literally didn't know how hard to hit it. It was downhill, and I guessed wrong.
I was saying, Bethpage, the circumstances, playing with Tiger, the crowds, and then you're playing arguably one of the toughest golf courses in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually, I had a shaky start in the first, and didn't feel great in the second, and I started to free up, and I actually I hit the ball really, really well, And it was just one of those. Sometimes you have those rounds where you're a yard or two away from actually having a really good round of golf. I think I shot about 40 odd, but there was like I hit a couple of iron shots straight at the flag that just either plugged in the face of the bunker that 2 more yards would have been stiff, or it pitched in the heavy rough where 1 more yard it would have been stiff, and then couldn't get it up and down. And it was just one of those really frustrating rounds where I was so proud that I kind of righted the ship and I felt good and I felt in my element and I was playing to the crowd and I could enjoy every moment of it because I was not going to experience anything like this probably ever again in my lifetime. And so I was yucking it up with the crowd and high-fiving everyone, and they're all pulling for me and cheering my name. And it was an incredible day that I just wish the score would have been better and I could have sat back and said it was, okay, that was actually a really good day and a really good round.
Do you remember, Gary, about how long the golf course was playing?
It was about 7,600 yards, somewhere around there, 77. But it was, I played it in the practice round and I called my wife and said, this is going to be a short week because it was so long and it was soft. And, the first hole's not very long. And I think I hit a 7-iron, 6-iron into it. And that was one of the shortest holes. I hit hybrid into, most of the par threes and, it might have been 5 par fours. So, I had no chance playing against the best players in the world. And then those wizards, those sorcerers at the PGA Tour, all of a sudden did something overnight and come Thursday morning. So I didn't play it Wednesday, but I played it Thursday, obviously, after playing Tuesday. And it was a completely different course. I hit my first drive and I was 30 yards further down the fairway. And so all of a sudden I said to myself, well, actually, this is actually now a perfect golf course for me because I hit it straighter than everyone else. And now I'm hitting it 30 yards further. So now I can start hitting short irons into some of these holes. And where it was a hybrid before, now it's a 6-iron. And where it was a 6-iron, it's now a 9-iron. And, it was incredible. So I played great. And those first 2 rounds, it was right up my alley. And third round with Tiger was a little different, but I'll put that down to extenuating circumstances.
Yeah.
When you look at it, Gary, what separates the top 10 guys out there from the bottom 125? Because they all hit it incredibly. There's got to be something that separates Scotty Scheffler from number 125.
Yeah, it's really interesting in that I've kind of pondered this myself from playing and then commentating, and as you say, I think there's sort of I would say top 20 to top 25 in the world are just different. They're built different. They act different. They have the ability to play different under difficult circumstances, under pressure circumstances. On any given day, the strength in depth of the PGA Tour is so strong. Anyone can win a PGA Tour event, but it's when you absolutely have to perform. It's those great players just have a wheel. They have that extra gear that they can just narrow their focus just a little bit better. So when the pressure gets the highest and the stress gets their highest, they actually play their best. And the normal great elite players in the world just wilt that little bit. You just see how hard it is to close on the PGA Tour. You see some of the best players in the world kind of leak oil and kind of almost back into wins. And then you see some unusual names go grab a tournament and close without any problem at all. So there's an art to it, but it's that ability to do it, put yourself in position 8 to 10 times a year and then close it out multiple times. That to me is what separates the best in the world.
When you think about it from that aspect, how incredible was it that Nick Dunlop from an Alabama kid comes out as an amateur and wins on the PGA Tour?
Twice.
It's baffling. Well, you think about me as a 40-year-old rookie and you think about him as a 19-year-old college sophomore. It just baffles the mind. It really does. But I go back to what I said at the start of the podcast. These are now professionals at 15. They have a team around them. They have all of the tools that 10 years ago, guys who are elite players in the world who have been on tour 5 years had. And so now everyone has it. The best amateurs in the world have that team concept around them where, now they can earn money. Now they have NIL. So that's not it's not cost prohibitive. That was my big regret in that I didn't back myself enough to spend more money on trainers and maybe a putting coach and maybe a few things that could have got even more out of my physical side of my makeup. I did everything I could with the mental side, but I think there are a few things lacking in the skills department and the physical conditioning department. But for him to close the way he closed, I actually covered him and interviewed him at the Barracuda when he won his second event, and it's just there's a 20-year-old in a 35-year-old's body, and there's a lot of credit goes to a couple of his local guys that kind of mentored him. Jeff Curl at Greystone was is a wizened mini tour player, and he kind of would mentor him, caddy for him at the in a lot of the big amateur events. And my old teammate at Auburn, Scott Weaver, had a similar role of just being there for him and just using their wisdom and helping him navigate through amateur golf, junior golf, and then kind of getting him to college. And then now I would imagine he's got a so-called professional team around him that probably pushed out a little bit of the old team because you have to upgrade and you have to evolve how the team concept goes about. But he has those attributes that I was talking about. He gets better under pressure. His focus gets narrower. And he just has that sort of unshakable, unflappable demeanor where you don't feel like he's going to make a mistake, and you feel like the chasing field are going to make one or two mistakes coming down the stretch. When you think of someone like Sergio, you think of someone like Lee Westwood, immensely talented people, but it just felt like they were lacking if there was an 8-footer that needed to be made on the back nine, or if a wedge needed to be hit close, or if a chip needed to be got up and down. It just seemed like they lacked it under the utmost circumstances. And then that player of that next level just had that ability to make the putt when he needed to, or hit a fairway when they needed to. And that was the difference. Sergio was, 4 or 5 maybe good finishes away from having 4 or 5 majors, and Westwood maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Did you ever consider going over and playing the Euro Tour? Did you play some events over there?
I never did. No, I really wanted to early on in my career, but the PGA Tour and the European Tour couldn't quite get on the same page with dates, and they coincided a lot of the time. So it was a lot of money to waste if you couldn't make one of them. So I just stuck to the US, and I think I played one mini tour event in England. I think I made £400. So that was my career earnings in England.
Is that something you kind of regret now that you
Yes.
didn't?
Yeah, I wish I'd had a better representation that could have parlayed my story into some starts on the European Tour and some starts around the world. That would have been special for me because, the international game is how I got into it. I was named after Gary Player. I was, Seve was my hero growing up, and, the Open Championship was my holy grail of watching that every year and watching these international players that you didn't get to see very often all together playing where golf was begun. So that was another one of my regrets. I guess I got more regrets than I thought I did.
Well, let's kind of transition back into your time after your injury, and you went to work for Sky Sports, then kind of transitioned into the Golf Channel. And tell us a little bit about that, and then let's kind of move into what you've got going on today, currently.
Yeah. So as I said, the Sky Sports experience was invaluable in that it gave me a profile, and I was basically when PGA Tour Live started, it was Live at originally.
Mhm.
I was there, not from day one, but very early in the in how it was formed and what it's become today, and what it will become is, I'm quite proud to be part of that, starting where it started. And I'm probably a better on-course guy. Obviously I've got a pretty decent vocabulary, I'd hope, and I think being a less accomplished golfer or a less accomplished resume in regards to a PGA Tour career, I think it helps me relate a little bit more to the viewing audience. I think it's tougher for an unbelievably accomplished PGA Tour player to describe to normal people what it is they do so easily, whereas I found it harder to do. So I think I have a better way of of conveying the information and the difficulties of the shot, where I might see a shot and I'd be able to understand how difficult this shot actually is, and maybe someone with 10 PGA Tour wins would be looking at it and saying, well, that's a doddle. There's no challenge to that. Well, there's not to him or her, but there is to me and everyone else. And so, I really, I would like to think I am a little bit of a throwback in that less is more. Obviously, when you're brought up on the BBC and Sky Sports, that is a little bit more of the commentary style where people are tuning in to watch the best players in the world, not listen to me talk too much. And so I like to set up the shot, tell you how difficult it is, tell you what the extenuating circumstances are and the factors that are going to be involved here, and then just let it play out. And then hopefully my colleagues try and let it play out as well. It doesn't always work, but I like to think that that's something that people would appreciate, and don't talk for the sake of talking. I would always say that's probably my greatest advice that I would give anyone wanting to get into the broadcasting game is, the pictures tell 1,000 words. Why ruin it with adding another 500? So it's obviously different. PGA Tour Live, we're on air way longer. We cover every shot, so there's more talking involved. But it's just trying to be selective of, you don't want to bash people over the head with stats all day long. So if I use a stat, it's going to have some sort of relevance and pertinence that's actually going to tell a story.
Do you find it difficult to balance what people perceive as critiques or what players perceive as critical commentary as opposed to going the other way with too much fluff?
Yeah, I think players, most of them, they have healthy egos, so they don't like ever receiving criticism. But I think they're mature enough to understand when it's warranted. You can criticize, but there's a way of doing it. I mean, there's certain people that find it easier to do and make the point without making it personal, and others that maybe it takes a while for them to learn how to do that. So I feel confident I can make an opinion and be critical of a player. And if they do have feedback and they find out that they didn't like what they said, what I said, they'll come and find me on the range, and most of the time I'll have the evidence to back it up. And it's never happened to me, but I'm always there if if they do have a problem with what I say. But as I said, I try and keep it as positive as possible. I'm a positive person.
How would you have made the call on JT's chip clubs this past weekend?
I think getting the big ball before the little ball is never a good thing.
Yeah.
Did you find
we'll blame the grain. How about that?
Yeah.
did you find broadcasting came easy?
I did, because I actually would. I don't know if a lot of kids do it, but I would commentate when I was a kid, when I was on the range, or when I was playing with my brother, or when I was chipping against friends at Auburn and my teammates at Auburn and Wallace, and we would get in each other's head, and you would do a little commentary on them and try and put them off, and so it was something that I always enjoyed, of trying to have that that little bit of a lighthearted way of doing it, but enough with a little bit of needle in there as well if necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's get into the book. Give us a little overview of what it entails and why people should pick it up and become better golfers.
Yeah, it was an opportunity that came out. I wasn't commentating as much as I'd like, and so I had time on my hands, which is always a good thing and a bad thing. And out of the blue, a friend of mine who I used to stay with when I was a pro, I would stay with families most weeks, because I enjoyed that family dynamic. And a family that I spent some time with in Columbus, in Ohio, called me out of the blue. The guy, his best friend, was a sports psychologist that had written a bunch of baseball books for kids. And he said, man, Kurt really wants to write a golf book. Would you help him? Because he knew how much I loved golf psychology, and we just hooked up over the phone. And I loved what he had done with his baseball books. He had sent me a copy of a number of them, and he'd sold about 50,000 books. So obviously he was accomplished at it. But what I found is that, like I said a little bit earlier on, a lot of people are hesitant to get into golf psychology. They don't really understand it. They don't really understand the validity of it. They know players do it, and they know there's something there. but then they, maybe read a regular golf psychology book or listen to a golf psychologist. There's a lot of it's almost talking in riddles a lot of the time, or a book is a little bit too complicated and they give up quickly. And so, you never want to give a reader a reason to give up just because it either bores them or they don't really understand it or they can't follow it. And so with Beat the Course, Not Yourself, we followed the template of Dr. Ickes' book from his baseball, of doing it in the form of a story. And so originally we designed this for, he did his baseball books for children who are starting competitive baseball. And so we thought, well, obviously that would be a good thing to do with golf because there's never been a book written like that. And so we kind of designed it for sort of 15, 16-year-olds. It follows up with the PGA of America's ADM model, the American Development Model, that kind of, you start from a very young age, just developing motor skills, and then you kind of develop little by little, and then you start to have the competitive stage where you want to, fine tune your skills, but then add golf psychology. And so this is sort of that introductory vehicle to get into it. And so we thought, well, if we're going to write it for 15-year-olds, 15-year-olds really don't read books very often, and they don't want to read a book that is like a school book. So why not do what we've done, what you've done with the baseball book? And we wrote it as a story. And so it's a really easy, fun story to follow. The characters are strong. You can see yourself in the characters. And I think more importantly, you see other people that you know and you're around in competitive golf, and parents and coaches in these characters. So there's a degree of familiarity there. I think not only is this really invaluable for competitive juniors, but it's also just as important, maybe more important for the parents of these juniors, because they've spent a lot of time ferrying their kids around to coaches, to tournaments, to camps. They spend a load of money on lessons. They spend a load of money on tournament entries. And, there's a load of parents I've talked to who are just so frustrated, and they just see their kids make the same mistakes every single time they play in the tournament. They see the kid hit a perfect drive down the middle, take a wedge out and make a double bogey. And they just say, I don't understand. I do not understand how he can be so good and yet do this all the time in tournaments. Well, this is the reason. It's because of, just a lack of being in control of how they think, how they act, how they react emotionally, how they focus, all of these things, how they make decisions, how they make the right decisions, how they pick the right clubs. I'm just shocked how when you talk to competitive golfers of a younger age group who are not overly successful, the decision-making process it blows my mind. I actually did a little bit of volunteer coaching work with a local college team, and I was just befuddled that these kids have become college golfers with basically zero IQ of decision-making, club selection, what's a smart shot, what's a smart decision off a tee, like all of these things that I would talk to them, and I'd just sort of have to scratch my head a little bit and just say, could you just repeat what you just said? I didn't quite hear that. And then they said the same answer. And I thought, wow. So there was something in here that for the last 2 or 3 years, I'd kind of ruminated over. And I think this book kind of encapsulates this in a really clear, really easy to read format that is great for competitive juniors, great for the parents, but just as great for the average amateur golfer who's going to play a little bit of competition every now and again. It could be a dogfight, it could be a club championship, it could be, wanting to play well in front of the boss or playing with a client. Just that ability to just put yourself in the best opportunity to play your best golf. And it's a really, really difficult game. And golfers tend to make it way harder than it needs to be. And so this book, Beat the Course, Not Yourself, I think kind of will help you give yourself a game plan.
Very good.
I'm kind of interested to touch on things because we talk about how these really good junior players have entourages. They've got putting coach, they got swing coach, but that you show up on a college golf team and you say a lot of them literally have zero IQ
Mhm.
as to how to play the game. How do you explain that?
Well, it's when we see the Nick Dunlaps of the world, it's like watching the Tiger Woods of the world. So Tiger Woods was unlike any other touring pro, and there's 1,000, 5,000, however many touring pros in the world. He was completely separate from every other one. When we see a Nick Dunlap at college, he and another 20 players, 10 players are so far and above everyone else. And then there's that nice collection of people who have got a team around them and who do the right things, and they're successful, and they will shoot in the 60s, and they will be all Americans, and they will probably have a chance to be semi successful as a pro. And then there's the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other college golfers who, because there's so many programs and there's so many scholarships and there's so many spots, man, there's lots of people who are college golfers, but the reason they're at X college is because they don't have the golf IQ, the team, the commitment, the sacrifice to be in those top programs.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's the separating factor. So it's really cool to be a college golfer, and it's a great accomplishment to be one. But a ton of them don't get anything out of it and actually end up not really enjoying the experience because they actually go and start shooting, a lot of the time worse scores than when they were a junior, when it was fun and they kind of just played freely. And now it's a little bit more of a job. And, now they're having to wake up at 5 o'clock to work out, and they're having to be on the course at a certain time and do these drills and everything. And a lot of them, a lot of coaching is a sales job. You have to have them buy in to what it is you are doing, and tell them why it is you're doing this. When you're dealing with 18, 19, 20-year-old kids and you tell them to do a drill and you don't really explain why it's useful, they're going to kind of switch off and just go through the motions. So, the more I talk to great golf coaches, the more I understand that they are great salespeople. They're great organizers. They help with discipline for the kids. They help the kids to be organized, and they help the kids understand what it is they're doing and why they're doing it. And that's why I'm so proud to have Nick Kleinert as one of the people that wrote the foreword to the book. He and Susie Whaley, past president of the PGA of America, both understood the validity of the book. Nick, from his perspective of what he sees in potential recruits and what he looks for in addition to the physical skills. And then obviously Susie Whaley, who's coached kids from a very early age through this American development model. So there's a lot of great attributes to this book that really kind of sort of dovetail in from a lot of directions.
Absolutely, that's well said. We've had Coach Clenard on the podcast, and that was the first time that I'd ever had any interaction with him. And what an impressive individual that he is.
Exactly. Yeah, and the kids sit and they listen. When I'm around some other kids and their coaches, there's just a lot of shuffling in their seats. There's a lot of, checking their phones under the table. There's a lot of yawning. There's a lot of staring past you. I talked to a number of teams, and, I talked to the Auburn team. Every single one paid attention every second. They asked really deep, incisive questions, and the other teams I talked to just wanted to get it over and done with. And that is instilled by someone like Nick Kleinert, who he just has that presence. He was a great player. He was at Wake Forest himself, and as a result, those players buy in to what he's selling. And yeah, I mean, these guys have got to sacrifice. It is really hard. There's a lot of pressure. The hardest tournament they'll play every week is the qualifier to travel. And they know if they slip in the gym, if they slip their grades, that's a black mark against them. And if they're not giving it their all in practice and in the gym, Coach Kleiner, if it comes down to a decision over two people who have scored the same, he'll use that evidence of their commitment to the program and their commitment to the team to make that decision if they travel or not.
Yeah, and I've got several friends who are college golf coaches at all kinds of levels, and in talking with them, they're echoing a lot of the same things that you just laid out in this book. So that's good stuff. Thanks,
Great.
Gary.
Right. Well, as I said, the most important thing is to get it in a simple language
Yeah.
where someone is going to be able to read it. If they want to, they can read it in an hour or two, And there's little questions at the end of each chapter where it kind of allows you to buy into it a little bit, make it a little bit more personal. I say it's one of those books that you want to bring a highlighter with you and a pen, and just make notes in the margins, make notes where the questions are asked. And that's what I did with golf psychology books. I had dog-eared copies of 2 or 3 books that I've read probably 30, 40 times. And every time I read it, I find something else that I thought, oh, I can't believe I didn't pay attention to that last time. That's really important. And so that's what I want people to do with this book. And I think it's one you want to reread, because the first time you read it, you'll start to say, okay, I like the sound of this plan. I'm going to try and implement this. And then the next time you read it, you will be able to use the feedback from what it is you've done over the last month or 2 months and say, I didn't do that. I forgot. Let me reread that again. Okay, that makes sense. I'm going to adjust what I do this time and do this thing a little bit better. And then just keep doing that. And eventually you'll have that dog-eared copy, and you'll have lots of notes and post-it notes sticking out of it. And I guarantee you that will be your roadmap to success, to give you the best opportunity. It doesn't guarantee success, but it will give you the best opportunity.
And so is the book available at Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, online? Where?
It's all online at Amazon. So beat the course, not yourself. Go to Amazon, $16.95, so about the same price as a sleeve of Titleist. And I guarantee they will last a lot longer, and it will be a more permanent fix than a little bit of equipment. But it's a self-published book, so it's amazing that to be able to self-publish now is really a great opportunity, where you get an editor, you get an illustrator, you get a formatter, you send it off to Amazon, and they have it ready. So as soon as you hit order, they print you up a copy and they send it out that day or the next day. And there's no printing 1,000 copies and having them sitting getting mildew in a factory somewhere. So it opens up the opportunities if you do want to write books. I really thought it was going to be a lot harder and the process be tougher, but it's been really fun.
Well, good for you. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I'm curious, going back to the guy who lands in Birmingham or wherever as a coming off a, what was it, pensions administrator, shows up, gets off plane, shows up in Coleman, Alabama, but here 40, 30 years later, you're still in Alabama. You've made a home here. Why stay here in Alabama?
Well, I tell you what, it's a little bit of a cliche, but the Southern way of life is just a really comfortable way of life. I've met so many lifelong friends here. It's a great place to raise a family. The golf's great. The climate's great, apart from that 3 or 4 months in the summer where I melt. But I just like the lifestyle. I love travel, and I've been to some of the greatest cities in the world. And I love London, and I love New York and Sydney and these great places. But it's, you get worn out, and it's just nice here. And what I like about Alabama, it's modernizing. It's becoming it's becoming a destination place now. Not just for golf, but for dining and experiences. Birmingham is a great place to hang out. Great restaurants, great bars. And a really good business climate as well. So there's so many great attributes to the state. And when you think about, the legacy it had not that long ago, to see the sort of, in effect, a phoenix rise from the ashes, I think is, it's something I'm proud of. I used to be a little bit reluctant to kind of talk about Alabama, because there was still that, that rawness to civil rights and the steel industry disappearing, and, all of those tough things that had happened to Birmingham and the state. And now it is a vibrant, modern, welcoming, more inclusive state. And, it's only going to get better as well. And I really appreciate being a part of that, because I come from a diverse country. And I can see that, there's many similar attributes now.
You mentioned football. Which style do you prefer now? Now that you're a transplant.
On my PGA Tour profile, I said I'd rather score the winning penalty kick for England to win the World Cup than win the Open Championship. So I guess you can see where it goes. But I am still a huge Auburn fan, and actually, my first year at Auburn's when they went 11-0 under Terry Bowden, and I managed to become I think a fully fledged redneck at least 7 or 8 weekends a year at Auburn. I had an orange jumpsuit, a massive Auburn cowboy hat, and I threw myself into it with a little orange goatee that I grew. So I didn't know I had orange facial hair, but it matched nicely with the jumpsuit.
We have to see those pictures.
I'll have to dig them out somewhere.
Yeah.
They'll surface somewhere on the internet at some
They
point.
probably
Well, great. This has been so much fun, Gary, hearing your story and learning about the book. We appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you. And I, I actually do motivational speaking as well. I think my journey is one of those stories that people really resonate with because, my story is your story of, most people, it took them a while to become successful. And there was a lot of pitfalls. There was a lot of dead end turns. There was a lot of pivots, a lot of heartache, a lot of sacrifice. And so that's exactly what I experienced. And, I've done some public speaking. And a lot of people have come out who are incredibly successful business people and say, "God, that's very similar to my story. It took me 20 years to make any money, and now I'm doing what I'm doing." So it's I got a few strings to my bow, and so anyone out there want to have me as a motivational speaker would love to do it.
That's awesome. One last question. Now, when you drive up 65 and you go past the Warrior exit, have you told your son that's the package store I used to stop at?
I don't know if it's still Wayne's or not, but Wayne's package store I think was a very high earner from Cornman County. Let's put it that way.
I'm very familiar with Wayne's from my days in Coleman.
Exactly. And what was nice, I had a British driver's license, so I actually got to drink a month earlier legally because we flip the days and the months around. So instead of the 7th of August, it was the 8th of July. So I was very happy about that.
Well,
Oh,
thanks again, Gary, for your time. Your story's been phenomenal and very educational. The best of luck with the book, and thanks again for coming on the Cart Barn podcast.
Well, terrific. Well, check out my website, www.garychristiangolf.com.
absolutely. Buy the book, y'all.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank Gary Christian again for taking an hour of his time to talk to us on the Cart Barn podcast today. Interesting conversation with Gary. And again, you can pick up his book. It's called Beat the Course, Not Yourself, available on Amazon. So we're looking forward to seeing you again on next week's episode of the Cart Barn podcast.